Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast here at J Moore Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your questions and memories of the Passover table in the comment box, and I will check from time to time. Today's guest is Chef Director of Dining Services at Atrium Village Senior Living in Owings Mills, Maryland. This new state-of-the-art community emphasizes an array of new services and upscale amenities, including 2 restaurant-style dining venues and 2 new bistros for which operations and management with Chef Kalkstein handles all the dining services. He has 35 years experience in food service operations and management within the restaurant industry. Todd so graciously shared his mother's Mama Kalkstein's brisket recipe on J Moore's website and magazine for the Jewish holidays. He has agreed to join us today so we can talk the Passover table, memories, and more. You are invited to join the discussion today. Just add your memories and questions in the comment section, and I will be checking from time to time. Let's welcome Todd.
Hello.
Hello. Todd, other than the show today, what else is on your plate?
Well, we have a new management company here at Atrium Village, and we're redefining the senior lifestyle in Owings Mills. It's been a breath of fresh air with the new management company. And I'm currently writing new menus for a new menu cycle for the spring-summer menus that we have. Just completed the menus for Passover and Easter. And, really looking forward to implementing some new and exciting, foods here at Atrium Village.
Okay. And memory serves me, you have the residents, you have sort of 3 levels of dining, don't you?
Correct. Well, 3 communities. We have an independent community, we have a assisted living community, and we have a memory care community.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk about Passover. Growing up, when you were a young child, did you go to your Bubby and Zadie's house for Passover? What was Passover like for you as a young child?
Well, Passover for me as a young child was at our house. Unfortunately, my mom's parents had passed away before I was born, and my father's dad had passed away before I was born. So we just had my grandmother, and she wasn't really much of a cook. It all fell on my mom, who I believe that I got my food, skills from. She was a great teacher, and I was one of 5, and I was the child that always stood next to mom when she was cooking and picked up all her recipes and, carried them on, till today. So, I am where I am, thanks to my mom when it comes to cooking.
Yeah. Well, I have to say there were certain things that my mother made that nobody else could touch ever. And I was telling Jen, our producer, earlier, gefilte fish. My mother would go to Lexington Market. She would buy her fish. She'd take the head and the bone separate. She would not let them grind the fish. She would bring it home, and in this wooden bowl with a mezzaluna, she would chop it so it was flaky like a quenelle, and how she flavored it. It was light as air, and it wasn't typical gefilte fish. I had my haircut, which people can tell, about a week and a half ago. And my barber, hairdresser, said to me, because he's not Jewish, he says, "What's the story with gefilte fish?" And I said, gefilte fish, gefilte means stuffed. And that's what they used to do. They take the fish and make other fish balls and stuff it inside the fish and cook it. And he says, "Would I like it?" I said, "Doubtful." I said, it's like growing up. I said, "You're Italian." I said, "Did your parents make tripe?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said he smelled up the place. He says, "But they grew to like it and enjoy it because it was what they were raised with." Right. Did your mother make the gefilte fish from scratch?
Unfortunately not. She would buy it. she'd go to a local kosher fish store, and she would buy the gefilte fish. It came pre-made, and it was wrapped in like a wax paper, and she'd boil it in like a sugar water. So I can't honestly say that in my house, we made gefilte fish. My mom would make fresh chopped liver for the holidays. And as I'm sitting here saying it to you, I could smell it and see her with her wooden chopping bowl and her hand grinder, and it was attached to the kitchen table, and she would saute her chicken livers and boil the eggs. And, I was her little helper who would hand crank the grinder and make it, and with the sauteed onions. And, those are the fond memories that I have when we would do, Passover. She would make the matzo ball mix and put in, all her special ingredients, and she'd let me make little balls. And, obviously I was a little kid, so it's time she'd drop it into the boiling water. And, it was great memories that I had, when my mom would make, Passover, because she was a phenomenal cook. And
So what did she put in her matzo balls? I understand. I use the mix and I do add-ins. What do you do?
so my family and I, believe it or not, even here at Atrium Village, we buy a mix, although our mix comes in a 5-gallon bucket. And what we do is we add extra matzo meal to make them a little bit denser. And then the secret ingredient that my mom always added to her matzo balls was nutmeg. And we add a little bit of nutmeg, not a lot, but just a little bit. And it really gives a different flavor profile to the matzo ball when you make it. And I've been married to my wife for 29 years. And I got to say, my wife makes a mean matzo ball. And, she likes it a little denser also. And she's learned to put the nutmeg into the matzo ball.
Well, it's interesting. People that, if you go out, those who are non-Jewish, you might see the matzo ball mix. Just think of it as a dumpling.
Right.
We were talking earlier, I grew up in a family where there were floaters. They were light and airy. And I couldn't quite get it. I mean, it was okay, but I couldn't get it quite airy enough until somebody says, put another egg in it. And then it was light and fluffy. But I would add, whatever I had, some thyme and some dill into the matzo ball. Could be a little garlic powder, whatever moves me.
Another trick to making the matzo balls lighter is you take an egg white and beat it up, and then you fold it into the matzo ball mix, and that will make it lighter as well.
Right. Just to explain to people, the matzo balls usually call for some sort of fat and oil, or in the Jewish religion, a lot of people put in schmaltz, which is rendered
Right.
chicken fat.
Right.
What I do is when I make my chicken soup and I chill it, the fat coagulates on the top and I save that. And that
Right.
has all the flavors that I put in the chicken soup, and that's what I use. Just my little tip.
My mom, after she would make her chicken soup, she would sham the fat off the top of the chicken soup, and she would save it as well. And she would saute her chicken livers in there for her chopped liver. She would save it sometimes for the matzo balls. And then, it was just a nice little added, addition to any dish to have that chicken fat as opposed to just using vegetable oil.
Right. The funny thing, I'm going to get back to the gefilte fish, and my mother would make it. My sister and I would eat the raw gefilte fish. We were eating sushi before we knew what sushi was. She says, you want to scrape the bowl. And I think I've told this story before. Before she moved to Florida, she had a yard sale and she sold the wooden bowl and the mezzaluna. And I would have loved to have that. So many memories.
Yeah, I think that wooden bowl of my mom's is in Florida right now with one of my sisters.
Have you added any new traditions or anything new to your Seder?
This year at Atrium Village, as opposed to doing some of the real traditional dishes like brisket, this year I'm going to have the first night of Passover here at Atrium Village. We're going to have a filet mignon, a differently seasoned sliced filet mignon that we're going to just do a little bit differently. We are going to have, instead of a noodle kugel, we're going to have a potato kugel. We're just going to do things a little bit different, but keep it, traditional, so that the residents, have a great experience here at the community.
I didn't know if there were any special requests. We look at where we came from and what our homes were like, and Was your family Ashkenazi, which means Germany, Eastern Europe background? Was
Yes.
it Sephardic,
My
which is,
family came from Eastern Europe.
okay. So Sephardic, for people who are watching, Sephardic is Spanish diaspora. Then the Mizrahi, which is considered the Oriental Jews, which is basically the Middle East, Syria, um, in that area. And there's actually Ethiopian Jews, which is called Beta Israel. So their food, in looking things up, one of the things they make is called gomen, which is basically collard greens that we've come to know from the South, smothered with onions, garlic, and ginger. I just didn't know if there was one in particular that you've picked up from, any of the recipes from Syria in that area, or Spanish tables.
I'm not going to say that we really have. We're a little bit more traditional here at the community. When I try to do things that are a little bit out there, I got to wheel myself back in because some of the residents want to be more traditionalist, and I think a lot of the residents that we have here are the Ashkenazi or Eastern European Jews. I don't believe we have currently any Jews that are from the Middle East. So I would think from that perspective, the menus that I'm writing for at least this Passover are going to be more Eastern European, if not all Eastern European, as opposed to any of the other varieties that you had mentioned before.
We talked slightly before going on air. There's been such a growth in vegans that any suggestions, or what have you found popular for the vegan Passover table?
Well, my younger sister, who's a veterinarian, is a vegan. And when she would come over to our house in Owings Mills, we would make a vegan matzo ball soup. So, instead of a chicken-based broth, we would use a vegetable-based broth. We'd still use the carrots, onions, celery. We put maybe a little bit more flavoring in there, like bay leaves, put dill, and make the matzo ball. She would not eat the matzo balls, so we wouldn't put the matzo balls in her soup. But her family, that's not as strict as she is, they would eat the matzo balls because they would eat the eggs. And then the other dishes that we would make, we would just omit any type of animal flavoring in there. We do, grilled vegetables, or we do potatoes, or we do, things of that nature that would, blend well with what her lifestyle is. She eats a lot of beans. She eats a lot of legumes. So although my sister is Ashkenazi, she would definitely have a palate that is more Sephardic, that would blend more to her ways of means. So she would have, beans, rice, and things of that nature.
Right. I saw that for Passover that there was a recipe for quinoa paella, and that sounds very interesting.
Okay.
And quinoa cooks up so fast. I'm just looking here. I talked about my mother going to Lexington Market. Your mother went to the kosher butcher. In my day, my mother would go to a kosher butcher here in Baltimore in an old neighborhood up near Garrison Boulevard and Liberty Road. And she would get trays, and you find it in the stores, some of the grocery stores that were keeping up with the Jewish trade, trays of unfertilized eggs, which they can't do anymore. And it was basically, it looked like just yolks. And she would have that in the soup, and we would fight over those. Just going back, what my memory is. I have a question. What is your favorite food, high end, low end, or in between?
My favorite food is definitely Chinese food. I could definitely eat it 7 days a week. And my wife and I recently just got back Monday night from New York City, and we went to Chinatown, and my wife said that I had a smile on my face from the second we got out of the lift and went to the restaurant, and until we left New York City, because it was just, to me, it's just absolutely, a delicious type of food. And there's so many different variations that you could have. And it's fresh, and it's flavorful, it's bountiful, and I love Chinese food.
Well, so do I, and you can get great dim sum down in Chinatown, that's for sure. I think I've hit a couple of those places. And okay, so I think you answered that question because you could do high-end Asian food and you can do low-end. So I think it was pretty well covered. They call matzah the bread of affliction. It doesn't rise, it's flat cracker. And it was David Lebowitz, who's now in Paris, a great pastry chef, who put out a number of years ago matzah brittle. Have you ever made that?
Yes.
To explain to people, line out the matzah, put caramel on it, and then chocolate, and it melts. And it's so good. And I remember my girlfriend who used to have Glaze Cafe, and nobody had the recipe, and she was charging, I think, like $17 a pound at that time.
Right.
I've made it here, put dried cherries, whatever. Everybody look it up, David Lebowitz, and it's matzah brittle, and the recipe's up on the internet. Whatever. Okay, I'm looking there. My mother would make a chilled soup.
Okay.
And we would get a bowl. It wasn't like a little dish and you dip part of an egg in it. I was just wondering what your family tradition was with that.
My mom would make a huge pot of matzo ball soup, and we would have the boiled chicken in it, obviously, and she would have, we called it at home pupiks, but I guess the correct word would be gizzards. And when I was younger, she would put chicken feet and things of that nature in the soup. And we would have the soup not only for the first or second night of Passover, but it would probably last most of the week. And then she would pull the chicken out, and we would be eating the, cold boiled chicken. And that was just, we would have that, for the entire week. And it was just, she never made a cold soup.
Okay. So at your table, the eggs and salt water were done differently. My mother's, not that we didn't have matzo ball soup, but we got a dish of eggs and salt water. I know in summers, sometimes I would make it. I would just crave it, and I would make it on its own. And just going on here and seeing, okay.
I mean, one of the dishes
Go ahead.
That my mom made with matzah, that is by far my favorite dish that my mom ever made, where she would go to the kosher butcher and buy a rib veal chop, and she would put it in matzah meal, egg, and then back in matzah meal, and she would fry it in a pan. And she would take the pan before she fried it. It was one of those pans where you'd plug in the dial and you turn it on the side, and she would caramelize onions in there, and then she would make this, I'm calling it breaded / matzah meal veal chop that to this day is probably the best dish I've ever had, and have great memories, of a dish like that. That could be done at Passover as well, because you are using the matzah for it.
Yeah, it's I simply like matzah with a little bit of butter and salt on it.
I completely agree.
It's a great snack. So I look forward to this time of year. I get my little box of matzah because that's all I need. For Passover, one of the traditions was to set a place setting for Elijah, who you leave the door open. For those who aren't Jewish and listening, you would leave it open, and there'd be a glass of wine, a place setting, and you leave it for Elijah to come in. And it's an early folk tradition based on the Haggadah. The Haggadah is the book read at Passover. And it starts off with, let all who are hungry come and eat. So you leave a place setting for Elijah. I bring it up because I had asked a couple days ago, people send in your memories, and they all seem to have to do with Elijah or the table. And one friend said, she said, we left the door open. It wasn't who let the dogs out. It was like who let the dogs in, because all these dogs came into the house. And then another person talked about their table, that they had a guest there. And at one point they got up and left the table. And all of a sudden he comes back dressed as Elijah. Not that anybody knows what Elijah looks like. Came back to the table. And a girlfriend of mine said when looking for the afikomen, her brother ate it all. Another one was another brother drank the wine before the service, the Manischewitz sweet wine, and was drunk and passed out. And at one time they brought a blow-up doll dressed up for Passover occasion to sit at the table. So I enjoy hearing these stories. I know that I was not the best student in Sunday school, and
Thanks, two of us.
I couldn't read Hebrew. I couldn't, Sunday school became a torture. My mother said, you're not going to be a bas mitzvah. You'll go till you're 16. And she had such trouble getting my sister and I up to go to Sunday school. But the effort was made. I have some background and understand some of the history, the Jewish history. But for Passover, since I was the youngest, they had to type out the 4 questions phonetically for me to be able to do it. And I remember I had Uncle Izzy who spoke, and he did the service in Polish. Uncle Morris did it in Hebrew. And all I know is as a young child, it seemed to last forever. Did you have those feelings? What were your feelings about your family table?
I think as a kid, it became more painful, I guess, the younger I was, to go and do the Passover service, because you just wanted to see your relatives and you wanted to eat. And I think more as I got older, it was more meaningful. And I believe that, from that standpoint, I know my wife and I both did trips to Israel as adults separately. She went on a women's trip and I went on a men's trip. And that was right before COVID hit. And, when she came back, she wanted to have, a more meaningful Passover. And then unfortunately COVID hit and threw a loop and everything. And, hopefully this year we're able to, have that, event again, for the family. So, but as a kid, it was, you wanted to be with your family, your cousins, your friends, and you wanted to eat.
Yeah.
And find the afikomen to get the money.
Yeah. The big $5. Was yours any more than that?
No, that was, but back then you're talking 40, 50 years ago, $5 was a lot of money to a little kid.
Right. But it was just my sister and I, and then all adults. I'm looking over my notes. Oh, I put up, just to let people know, you can find me on Facebook under Dara Bunjon, and I put certain things up for the public to see. And there was a show called Anything But Love years ago, and it starred Jamie Lee Curtis and Richard Lewis, the comedian. She becomes the girlfriend. She's non-Jewish. He's Jewish. He invites her to the Seder table. And they sit her next to the ex-girlfriend that Richard Lewis's sister invited there, because she saw the ex-girlfriend. She went with the brother. And how the ex-girlfriend sends miscues to Jamie Lee during the Passover service. And it's worth a watch. If you find me, Dara Bunjon on Facebook, I think I have it up for the general public. Or type in Anything But Love and put in Passover, and that'll come up. It's a cute little segment to watch. People said they, didn't remember the show, but it's been on for about 3 years. There are certain questions I'd like to ask at the end of the show, but before I do that, is there anything else that we should know about, you want to pass on about Passover, or any little trucks of the trades to people and when preparing for Passover?
My motto is keep it simple, stupid. I think if you get great ingredients and you cook it the right way, and you follow the recipe, I think it should turn out great. I think what a lot of people tend to do is they think more is better, and I think that has a tendency to screw up a lot of dishes. So, my motto is keep it simple, stupid, and that was something that I learned in culinary school many, many years ago, and I stick to that to this day. So,
Right. If it has 15 ingredients, don't make it. Right?
Well, you could. It's just make sure you have all 15 ingredients and you're not trying to modify. The recipe's written for a reason. You would like to think that it works, and don't try to modify it thinking that, you're going to omit 2, 3, 4 ingredients and put something else in. And then if the dish turns out terrible, you can't figure out why it turned out bad.
Yeah. So let me get to those questions that I like to ask at the end of the show. What has been your best bite this week?
This week, I'll have to say it was definitely Chinatown in New York City. And I don't know when I'll get back up there again, but, I have a smile on my face now because it was just thoroughly, I think, more so enjoyable for me than it was for my wife and my daughter, who joined us for lunch in Chinatown.
Okay, so what is your go-to dish, your all-time favorite Chinese dish?
Well, I think, the older Cantonese type food, which, has pork in it or things like that made the correct way, I think is very flavorful. I'm not a big spice guy because I think that a lot of times when you eat dishes that have a lot of spices, it hides what the actual flavor is, and you're getting the spice as opposed to the flavor in the dish. So I'm more of a, traditional Cantonese type person. But, to me, I love, simple, elegant, dishes, beef and broccoli. I love, they have salt and pepper dishes that you can get, in Chinatown, that they do different proteins that they put it in a salt and pepper brine. Steak type dishes, seafood dishes. But I would have to say, for me personally, my all-time dish is probably lobster Cantonese, made the old-fashioned traditional way.
Well, I like lobster Cantonese. You don't find it too much. Here in town, I happen to like wing wa.
Okay.
It's very old, traditional, and I've been to a couple places, and they're still the best wonton soup and good Cantonese food.
Excuse me.
Who inspires you now?
From a life standpoint or a cooking standpoint?
Cooking.
I guess my biggest inspiration for cooking would be my mom, but, my mom is no longer with us, but I would think, from a cooking standpoint, I love watching, cooking shows. I know this is going to sound crazy, but there was a cooking show many years ago, Yan Can Cook. I don't know if you remember that show, and he was very inspirational in myself and learning how to cook Chinese food. I actually spent some time working in a Chinese restaurant, learning how to cook, authentic Chinese food. But, right now, I'm a very, basic guy. I read a lot of cookbooks and cooking articles, watch a lot of, cooking shows. But I would have to say my most inspirational cook would have to be my mom.
Great. And to wrap up, what didn't I ask you that I probably should have?
Nothing. Wish you and your guest a happy, healthy holiday season, both Passover and Easter if they celebrate it. And that's
Great.
it. It's a pleasure to spend this time with you.
As always, a pleasure to spend time with you, and I thank you for sharing time and coming on. I heard that you did a cooking demo for earlier this morning. So I appreciate you squeezing us in because you got a lot of people to feed.
I don't do all the cooking, so.
Yeah. I think my cousin's working there. She
Jenna.
sent me in. Yeah.
Yep.
She's one of my many, many cousins. My mother was one of 9. My father was one of 7. Need I say anything else? All right, thank you. And I have a couple of notes for folks, and I want to talk about a Passover dessert. So thank you so much, Todd, and the best of the holiday season.
Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone, if you're looking for a unique Passover dessert, cookbook author Jennifer Abadi is teaching a viral prep and freeze for Passover. Italian flourless almond macaroons with pinoli nut and Syrian salted pistachio macaroons with orange blossom water. She's doing this tomorrow online. It's virtual at 11 a.m. to noon. The cost is $30. The link will come up in the comments section. And Jennifer will be on the show on April 27th. You might be interested in her cookbook of Sephardic and Judeo-Arabic Seder menus and memories from Africa, Asia, and Europe called Too Good to Pass Over. That's Jennifer Abadi. And again, she'll be on the show April 27th. This is her other book called A Fistful of Lentils, and it's about her Syrian grandmother and family recipes from that area. I want to wish everyone a good holiday season. I will return on Thursday, April 13th with my guest, Sheena Davis. She is the butter monger. So everything you wanted to know about butter and more will be the discussion on April 13th. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at food@jmoreliving or on Instagram at Dara Cooks. All shows are immediately archived in video form on JMOR's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com. Feel free to dig into our video archives of past shows. We truly appreciate when you share our show with friends and family. And as I like to say and end my show, may your plates always remain full. Have a good holiday, and I'll see you.